defining moment when rising debt levels, elevated debt service costs, constrained revenues, and shrinking development finance collide with, of course, the usual growing, almost unlimited demands for public spending, public financing, and provision to the people of infrastructure, education, healthcare, and social protection, the all-important social safety net that helps to ease the passage of difficult and necessary reforms that we are undertaking in Nigeria, bravely led, courageously led by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, GCFR. The theme of this conference, strengthening parliamentary oversight of public debt, the role of finance and public accounts committees, is both apt and it is timely. The message is clear. We must act decisively to strengthen oversight, deepen fiscal discipline, and ensure that public resources deliver real and measurable value and facilities that are fit for purpose to our people. If we look at the vision behind the President's actions, it is to build a strong, resilient, and inclusive economy. Inclusive in the sense that it provides good quality jobs for men, for women, for young people in particular, and where the private sector drives growth. The private sector is 90% of the Nigerian economy, and it's the same generally across all the countries present here today. It is the private sector that we look to make the investments that increase productivity, that grow the economy, create jobs, and thereby lift millions out of poverty. And government's role is to serve as an enabler, a policy maker, a lawmaker, a catalyst. Nigeria's economic vision is anchored on strong, resilient, and inclusive economy. And we can identify two key pillars of that strategy. Macroeconomic stability, and that is following on from, as we all know, immediately upon assumption of office, Mr. President tackled the age-long distortions which were bedeviling the Nigerian economy and holding back its prospects of achieving its potential. Following from those removal of the major distortions, and we all know what they are, and we'll repeat them in due course, the next step was macroeconomic stability, creating a predictable environment where private investment can thrive and it can grow at scale and drive productivity. And the second one was strategic public investments. Before you can have the private sector come in, before you can have people investing and engaging in economic activity, the key pillars have to be in place. The fiscal buffers, the financing, the public sector funding for high-impact investments in education, health, and infrastructure, even agriculture and technology. These are the foundations of macro stability that will allow growth to thrive. And so the government's role, as is being repeatedly said, is not to crowd out the private sector, but to, with the help of you lawmakers, you policymakers, and legislators, to remove distortions, unlock opportunities, and create the right environment for investment. And let us look for a moment at the world context. Currently, the world is beset by global uncertainty, highlighted by a regime of reciprocal tariffs, protective tariffs. And this is a withdrawal from multilateralism, from the world coming together as it did under COVID, as it is doing under climate change. There's a withdrawal from that sense of world effort. And instead, there's a reduction in world trade. World trade is what helps countries be participating in the growth of the world economy. It is reducing. Instead, subsidies for production domestically are being put in place. So about $2 trillion worth of world trade has disappeared and gone into subsidies. And this reduces the ability of countries to participate in growth and development as a result of being included in world trade. And similarly, development assistance, funding for developing countries, whether in health, whether in general agriculture sector, or even balance of payments assistance, it is being reduced. Less help is out there, and in fact, developing countries are even putting back more than they are getting in terms of concessional financing. And what that means is that we have to look as a country, as a region, and as a continent to our own devices. We have to be more self-reliant. We have to reform our economies. We have to increase our tax to GDP. We have to apply technology, automation, digitization, and even AI to our revenue efforts. And finally, we need to crowd in the private sector. That's exactly what is happening in Nigeria. And with the removal of fuel subsidies, liberalization of the exchange rate, these difficult decisions have also been taken because they were necessary and they're yielding positive results. In addition, the priorities of the government include debt transparency, growth-enhancing borrowing, domestic revenue mobilization, as I've emphasized, and coordinated debt treatment. And what are the results? If we look, the Nigerian economy is turning the corner. The reforms are delivering measurable impact in terms of investor confidence, in terms of lower spending on fuel imports, greater energy self-sufficiency, and value added. By next year, we expect to have 1.2 million barrels per day refining capacity. And that is in line with the government's objective of not exporting raw materials, whether it's agriculture, whether it's in the oil and gas sector, add value and then export. That is how jobs are created and the economy grows. Likewise, the fiscal space, though tight, is expanding. Of course, fuel subsidies have been removed. The states and local governments in particular have enjoyed, under fiscal federalism, very substantial increases in the funding available to them. They are mostly, except for 4 or 5, they're running surpluses. And they have that opportunity to direct resources to strategic sectors. The all important, as topic of today, debt service ratio, it came down remarkably in 2024 to about 60% of revenue. It ticked up slightly as a result of some of the necessary funding that had to be done earlier this year. But the commitment and the objective is to bring down those debt service levels. Likewise, debt to GDP ratio is a comfortable 38.8%, partly based on the fact that there was a usual and correct rebasing of GDP by the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics. So our aim is to restore fiscal discipline. And as speakers have said before, as the president of WAPAC has said, we are looking to have debt sustainability. And part of the way there is to ensure that borrowing yields returns, focusing on project-tied borrowing, looking at when these funds are borrowed and invested, there will be a direct cash flow return that helps to service that outstanding debt. And of course, discipline means not relying on printing of money, not relying on funding outside of the market and outside of the rules and regulations, which is what it speaks to an expectation that tax to GDP will rise once that all-important comprehensive reform, which actually lowers the tax burden for the least able and makes tax payments simpler and more automated and easier to comply with and fairer. That is what we can look forward to in the very near future. Already the implementation processes are underway to ensure we have smooth, efficient implementation of that important tax reform program. And of course, we need to set our fiscal targets. We have a Financial Responsibility Act that sets certain limits which, although they may change from time to time, our commitment under the rule of law is to limit ourselves, for example, to 3% of GDP as a fiscal deficit, a debt service ratio under 50%, debt to GDP ratio of not up to 60%, and tax to GDP, 18% in the first instance is a target, but rising over time. Now, Parliament's role as the oversight is the pillar of sustainability. A sound fiscal framework is not just the responsibility of the executive, it demands partnership, leadership, rigorous oversight from parliamentarians such as you seated here, especially from the public accounts and finance committees. So therefore, I call on WAPA members to help strengthen budget credibility, help align borrowing with development priorities, champion transparency and accountability, support institutional reform, and enhance budget monitoring. So it is, as I conclude, a shared responsibility. Nigeria stands at, I would say, not so much a crossroads, a bend, a turning point, turning round into the right direction. We do have rising revenues. There are growing investment inflows, growing foreign exchange inflows, as the central bank has remarkably achieved in recent months, and as well as a stable exchange rate. and a stronger foundation for inclusive growth. And in particular, the manufacturing sector has an important opportunity based on a very competitive exchange rate. It makes products made in Nigeria, even small scale, medium scale, as well as the larger manufacturing, they are all competitive. I'm sure our brothers from West Africa, they will find that there are items in the market here that they can even informally export on their way, as they depart, because they will find the prices very, very competitive. So, on the one hand, we have this rising trend, this positive trend. But on the other hand, just like others around the world, we do have elevated debt levels. We do have significant debt service costs because the challenge of monetary stability sometimes has meant higher interest rates. In 2023, interest rates were 8%. And now we know they're closer to 20%. So that's that is the task that must be met. The ability to still service and meet obligations at a much higher interest rate. And we have, as inflation falls, we look forward to interest rates also falling. And of course, the social safety net has to be kept in place, has to be strengthened. So let us commit ourselves to prudent borrowing, realistic budgeting, transparent reporting, and by yourselves, by you elected members of the various parliaments, rigorous oversight, so that we can build fiscal frameworks across our countries, across our region, and indeed across our continent, sound, sustainable, and resilient fiscal situations, so we can secure prosperity, stability, and opportunity for future generations of our populations. Thank you, and God bless.